again, is ultimately, or of course with science, fear of all these technological experiments. The fear here is principally the fear of what will happen with this fear, which is, I think, the fundamental fear of modern technology, which is what? It's not only that modern science and technology are more powerful. I think that there is a fundamental difference in the sense that previously science nonetheless wanted just to understand, reproduce, and so on. The horror of modern science is that it can produce new forms of monsters. And again, this is not innocent. Like you have, what was still now perceived as monstrosity, all those cows with two heads or whatsoever, all these freaks of nature, now becomes the result. So this fear that things will explode out of control. But I claim, as a Lacanian, that nonetheless, behind all this is fear of the neighbor. And I claim that the big problem today is how to dominate, control this explosive dimension of the neighbor. Now let me slowly approach conclusion, slowly but not too slowly, with a couple of examples. One is, you remember a year ago it was New York Times bestseller, Sam Harris, a book entitled The End of Belief. And very appropriately, this very book also, of course, justifies torture. And it's pretty horrible. But why? Maybe if you read the book, you know what it is about. It starts with this simple observation, we all know it, that for most of us, it is much easier to push a button which will kill 10,000 people, 100,000 people out there, you don't see it, than to effectively torture a person here in front of you. Now, Sam Harris' point is that this type of moral, ethical sensitivity is a blind instinctual reaction which is just a remainder of past evolutionary outdated attitudes. That it's a evolutionary remainder which we have to get rid of. He even compares it with the moon illusion. Like primitive people think moon is just a small circle up in the sky. Now we know it's quite large. The same type of illusion predominates in our moral life. So he dismisses this very fundamental resistance, disgust at torturing another being as literally. The reasons for this resistance to torture are, I trust, every bit as neurological as those that give rise to the moon illusion. So he nonetheless admits that we have to live with it, and then he proposes, I think, a pretty horrifying solution, a kind of a truth pill, not in the sense that I think it was reported these days in the newspapers, how scientists try to develop a truth pill, not having to torture, but truth pill which does torture, but kind of a decaffeinated torture. In what sense? His idea is that to develop a pill which subjectively the person who takes the pill would suffer incredibly, but from the outside it would appear that the person just took a nap. And he says, wouldn't it be wonderful? You force him to take a pill, the guy takes a nap, awakens, I confess everything you want, and so on. No? What's horrible here? Three things. The first one, the most obvious, coffee, yes, but decaf coffee, alcohol-free beer, fat-free cakes, and so on. And now, since I cannot resist vulgarity, I cannot refrain from mentioning ultra-vulgar example, the contribution of Venezuela to it. It's not a joke. I read recently, about 2 months ago, that, I will not pronounce words, they are too vulgar for me, but you know what beans are supposed to give you, so-called winds or whatever. Okay, the claim was that Venezuelan scientists developed a new variety of beans where you don't get winds. So it's wonderful. Now we give decaf coffee with wind-free beans or whatever, and the guy here offers us, again, decaffeinated coffee. It's the same. But there is a much more fundamental dimension here. Why is this reasoning wrong? Because I claim that when Sam Harris talks about this proximity, is the other too close to us or not? He is too short there. This proximity is not physical proximity. It's the proximity precisely of the neighbor, who can be too close even if he is far away, and so on, you know. That's the definition of the neighbor, that it intrudes. So I claim that this argument only works if the other human beings are no longer treated as neighbors. They simply become objectivized in this field of calculation where you can say, okay, I torture you here to prevent greater number suffering of them. The dimension of the neighbor gets lost. So, this is, okay, I have here, maybe I shouldn't talk too long, because what I wanted to develop here is how even all our outbursts of violence are ultimately outbursts against the neighbor being not simply the other person in front of us, but the abyss of the other, which can be detected only from our phantasmatic symbolic space, and so on, which is why I'm here again following Sloterdijk in a slightly more pessimist mood. I think that it's easy to praise today's global capitalism, the whole world, one big village, we can communicate instantly with each other. But the problem is, since we are still neighbors, each of us with our own symbolic universe, way of life, way of enjoyment, because of this, to quote Sloterdijk, more communication means at first, above all, more conflict. Which is why I think what we need today is absolutely not more communication, I should understand you, etc. I think we should begin more modestly, with more distance. How should I put it? We need a new code of discretion. We need to learn even to be more foreigners, to ignore others more. I think this is the great art today. Although, of